Welcome back to another Broken Banners Battle Report. Today I'm going to be doing a video I've been trying to do for a very, very long time, and that's one for Alliser Thorne, specifically a list from Jeor of varying names on the Night's Watch Discord, Castle Black in the community Discord. He's someone I really look up to when it comes to Night's Watch stuff. I've taken a lot of advice on how to play Night's Watch from him. He's absolutely phenomenal. He's so friendly, and he recommended this list for a report long ago, and I've played it probably about 6 times on camera to try and get a report, but for one reason or another, it's never worked. We're playing against one of my favorite factions, if not my favorite factions, the Baratheons. Granted, it's the lesser brother, Stannis, so but nonetheless, I'm going to dive right on into the list. So, this list seems a little plain on its face. It's Alliser Thorne in a unit of veterans and Qhorin Halfhand in a second unit of veterans. So it's double veterans, which on its face I'm a fan of. It plays a lot like double Rose Knights to me, which is one of my favorite kinds of Baratheon Renly side lists. The idea being that it's really hard to ignore this prickly unit that wants to get bogged down in melee combat when there's 2 of them. And unlike Rose Knights, Veterans of the Watch are speed 5, so they're not quite so easy as to ignore. They have a pretty good dice profile, solid enough stats, and they've got precision, so they got a little bit of oomph. The idea here is that you're going to have Alliser, who's got a little bit of sustain, and then you've got Qhorin, who's got a lot of his own self-ability to buff himself, keep up the damage output, and trickle down some wounds while he's getting beat up. So they serve a very similar role, but in 2 slightly different ways, which you can really use to fit them perfectly against whatever enemy it is that you're playing. For the other units, I've got leading up Golden Company crossbows, which I always feel a little bad running considering builder crossbows are right there, but you can just look at the 2 right there. Golden Company crossbows are just better. Sentinel is always going to be better than Ready Aim Fire. Ready Aim Fire is so easy to play against, and Sentinel just generally works on a ranged unit, and then the Golden Company crossbows also have a little bit more durability because they've got Iron Resolve. You put Sandor Clegane in them for yet another instance of threaten, so you can really keep the weakened tokens raining on the enemy. Rounding out the list, I've got Cold Hands. Cold Hands is probably going to be your best bet for this kind of list. You can tweak it around a little bit, but cavalry is so important in this game, and Cold Hands is going to fit that spot. In saving 3/3 with 4 wounds, he's actually going to be able to absorb a pretty considerable impact, especially when he's got Raven Flock. And if you ever manage to bait an enemy into it, using a Raven Flock when someone is attacking your veterans is absolutely diabolical. A 3-up unit is now going to be hitting on 5-ups, and you've got so many weakened tokens, you're probably going to be making them throw ants at you. If, God help, someone is attacking you with a 4-up unit, they're just blowing themselves up. It's honestly hilarious. So Cold Hands is a really solid fit in here, and again, the fact that he can resurrect himself is pretty nice. For NCUs, I'm running Sam, Aemon, and Dennis. Again, you can swap out Sam for Donald Noy here. Donald's going to give you a little bit of extra defensive ability. You probably won't ever really use him for the rerolls on the offense. You're more likely to use him from the armor buff, especially against a ranged unit. But I really have come to liking Sam because being able to dig so deep into your deck, especially because you could just keep attaching cards at the end of every round when you're activating your units, you can dig through your deck so effectively when you have bookkeeping. I find myself digging through the entirety of the deck by the end of round 5, and I don't think I ever take letters. Maybe once. You don't take Gilly because Gilly is just giving your opponent a pass token. Again, you might be able to try an iteration of this list where you drop Sandor to take Gilly instead, and you can mess around with that. I don't know if I recommend it, but the core is you definitely need Aemon and Mallister. Aemon's going to give you some defensive attrition survivability by giving you some really big heals when you start getting battered, and Sir Dennis Mallister is going to keep you swinging hard, and if your enemy is trying to ignore you, those extra condition tokens he can put out can really help push through some extra damage on a unit that essentially doesn't have a keyword. Precision really isn't the biggest. On the Stannis list is a list that I would actually recommend to any Baratheon player, and that's going to be Stannis, the One True King, and Kingsmen. Kingsmen are an absolute menace right now, and as a Baratheon player, I'll be totally honest and say these guys really need to get nerfed. To the Last is so absolutely insane on these guys. It needs to be swapped out with another ability, but up until then, Kingsmen are going to be a staple of any Stannis side list, especially with the One True King. One True King is going to be giving them a R'hllor affiliation, which Stannis cares a lot about with his 3 cards, all 3 of which are absolutely amazing. And you've also got Dauntless and Iron Resolve. This is a really interesting combo, especially with Kingsmen. With Iron Resolve, you're going to be going down to a 4/4 saves, which is just great. You're going to be pretty durable for such an offensive unit. And then Dauntless is also really nice, considering so much of Stannis is based around panic tests. Not just morale tests, mind you, panic tests. Test of Faith and In R'hllor's Name are both making you take a panic test, which is good for you, because it means you're being buffed by Iron Resolve, and you'll be triggering Dauntless for an extra heal. Next, we've got Stag Knights and Lightbringers, with Crownland Scouts to support them. So Crownland Scouts, you're just going to hear about them basically every Baratheon list. They are a staple for the Baratheon faction, Renly and Stannis side. Mark Target is nice. It's pushing through a little bit of extra damage with Baratheons who are, by and large, outside of Kingsmen, not particularly hard-hitting, but more importantly, tactical reposition, which takes these slow, chubby boys up to the next level in terms of speed. And you can use that to support a unit such as Stag Knights, who really want to get into the brawl, and they are so happy just duking it out from round 2 onwards, gaining increasing stats as the game goes on, and resilience, which really makes them difficult to fight in a one-on-one duel. Likewise, R'hllor Lightbringers are just a fantastic ranged unit. They've got great stats sitting at 4/6, which is going to make Stark Bowmen cry their eyes out, and then they've got Vicious with a pseudo spread fear on them. Ryan's going to be running Brawn in them, because Brawn is just, again, a fantastic pick in just about any ranged unit. Being able to threaten an extra range attack off the tactics port is always good, and Loyalty through Coin is really funny on Lightbringers because you can get them to 3/5 saves when you've got the bags. If you put Test of Faith on them, they're saving 2/5, and then you've also got the potential for an auto-pass panic in there, so R'hllor Lightbringers end up being tankier than Champions of the Stag, while having a threatening damage profile. The NCU suite, I think, is pretty standard and self-explanatory. Davos gives you charge rerolls and a unique little bit of control. Axel Florin poops out tokens like nobody else. Selyse and Shireen has a cheat death, and they can make someone a R'hllor unit, which is really great since he's got 2 non-R'hllor units. And then the Influence is just a fantastic combination with Stannis with how many self-inflicted tests you're going to be taking. We're going to be playing Here We Stand, so no objective tokens needed. I'm going to start off by putting down a Weirwood tree, and Ryan is going to put down a corpse pile. I put down a low wall, and he puts down a, you guessed it, another corpse pile, which is a pretty standard play for Lightbringers. They want everybody to fail panic tests, even if they end up failing their own, which is a little protected against because Stannis has an auto-pass panic test in his kit. I deploy first, and I put down Cold Hands over on my side of the board, not the full deployment because he's fast enough he can get around to where he needs. Ryan puts down Stannis and Kingsmen across from Cold Hands, and I put down Corin in Veterans opposite the Kingsmen. He puts down his scouts near to his Kingsmen to support them, and I'm going to put down Alliser Veterans on the other side of Cold Hands to balance out my deployment. From there, it gets a little bit trickier. He's going to have to put down his Stag Knights so he can keep his range at the end, and he's going to put them opposite my other Veterans. That way, each of my Veterans are blocked by one of his infantry units. I now have to place my ranged unit, and I decide to put them near the Stag Knights, because despite them having resilience, I'm far more likely to be able to kill them by sinking attacks into him. He's going to put his Lightbringers on the opposite end, probably thinking a similar thing, even though I've got Cold Hands over there. Out the gate, this game looks like it's probably going to be decided by the ranged units, since the Veterans are pretty considerable anti-melee walls. With the game starting, I go for a classic first move play, and Here We Stand. I take Dennis Mallister and I put him onto the swords. He's going to influence Alliser Thorne, but I'm going to use him to shoot the Stag Knights with my crossbows. I don't really get many hits through, but he fails the panic test for 3 wounds on top of the few hits that I do get, which is going to force him to play Axel onto the bags. He influences my crossbows, panicking them, and he heals up his Stag Knights a little bit. My turn, I'm going to play Sam, and I'm going to put him onto the letters, while also using Sandor's start of a friendly turn to threaten the Stag Knights, using Sam's letters zone to weaken the Kingsmen. He's going to put Stannis and Jeor onto the crowns, and Qhorin's going to crit fail the panic test, but I play Fires That Burn Against the Cold to re-roll that into a success. I'm then going to put Maester Aemon onto the horses and move my Alliser veterans up closer to the Stag Knights to try and make sure that the Stag Knights aren't going to get some big lucky charge out onto my crossbows after a tactical reposition. Ryan's then going to march up his King's Men to try and do the same thing. Even though I don't have tactical reposition, he wants to block my veterans from at least getting up close into the grill of the Lightbringers, which is going to be a lot of his damage, since he probably doesn't want to get bogged down in melee against me. I activate Cold Hands, attaching Watcher on the wall, and then with his maneuver and march, I move him onto the other side of Qhorin Half Hand to even out the amount of hands I have on that side of the battlefield. Ryan's then going to go for a crazy play, and he's going to charge his weakened Stag Knights into my veterans, which is, I think, a terrible plan. If you haven't figured it out, veterans are essentially the Rose Knights of Night's Watch. Don't engage them. He's going to play in R'hllor's Name to try and give himself some extra bonus, because he doesn't even have any keywords yet. It's not round 2. He doesn't have Grip Blow, so he's giving himself it off of in R'hllor's Name, and wow, okay, that's a lot of crits. But I mean, he's got his rerolls, and then I'm just going to weaken him. It's really not going to be the... Are you kidding? Nah, that's bullshit. Yeah, weaken that. Weaken that. I don't want any of that. So after the weaken token, he still gets a handful of hits out, but I managed to get a bunch on him. We both fail every single save, so he takes a ton off Counter-Strike, and then he also fails the panic test off of in R'hllor's Name. To add insult to injury, I'm going to hit him with a Seeing Their Flaws, so I can put a panicked and a vulnerable token onto him, and I'm going to attack him right back on the next turn. I've got the Malister influence to give myself rerolls, so I'm going to punch hard into him, and off the hits alone, I'm going to make him Stannis and Jeor. He survives with 3 wounds off that, but then he fails the panic test, which I'm going to make him reroll to try and just kill him off with it. I get a little greedy. He manages to survive with 2 wounds, and there we have. He is still ultimately punished for his very risky play, and I'm probably just going to kill him with the crossbows. He realizes that, though, and he's going to go for a second miracle, because, I mean, at this point, he's rolled so many 6s. Why the hell not? Especially with Davos there. He really puts himself on challenge mode by not using tactical reposition as ahead of time setup, but he gets a 6 on the charge, so, you know, whatever works, works. He plays Ours is the Fury on the charge to give him a little more oomph, and he's able to take a full rank off my crossbowmen. Start of my turn, I use Alliser Thorne's Threaten onto the Stag Knights so that hopefully they just kill themselves when they attack me off of Counter-Strike again, and I can get back to the world being the way that it should be. For my activation, though, I retreat the crossbow so they can go back to being a ranged unit, and he uses his ranged unit to shoot into my veterans. He's going to get a pretty fair amount of damage off on them, which I really wish I was able to do with my ranged unit. I mean, I guess I technically did, but that was off the swords. I really wanted to just hit him. He's going to spread fear over onto my veterans. It's not going to quite work out. So then I'm just going to, on my activation, move Qhorin up to try and protect Cold Hands from a miracle 6-inch or 6 roll-up charge from Stannis, because at this point, I guess that's something that I have to be worried about, because, wow, I've never seen Baratheon starter dice roll so many 6s. Start of the second round, he's going to activate Axel, putting him on swords and influencing my Alliser unit. We later realize he shouldn't have been able to put the panic token out because of the Light That Brings a Thorne that I attached earlier, but whatever. He still manages to get a really big hit off, and now he actually has crit blow, so whew, yeah, that's after the weakened token. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here, guys, but I take a bunch of damage after I deal with the vulnerable token. He uses the panic token on me. I managed to pass that panic test, which is going to allow me to play a sillier version of Final Strike called Pathetic Attempt, which is going to deal hits based on my remaining ranks. It's 4 hits back at him. I only need 1 wound. Boom. There we go. Stags are gone. That's the way things should be. They should have been dead before, and I'm very happy it's happened now. Now it's my turn, and I'm going to move Alliser Veteran on up by putting Malister onto the horses, influencing the veterans. The idea behind this one is that I want to try and force the Crownland Scouts to have to run away and gain complete tempo of the tactics board. Instead, I get a little surprised, and he's going to go ahead and put Stannis and Jeor onto bags, influencing the Crownland Scouts, and using the Lightbringers to shoot into my veterans. I play the Shields of the Realms of Men to re-roll, and I actually block everything. I don't even get to the panic test, which makes me think he's probably got Final Strike. So I'm just going to go ahead and put Aemons onto the crowns, zapping the scouts and healing up my veterans to save them so that they don't blow themselves on a final strike. Groundland scouts, smartly, now use that opportunity to run out of the way, and I'm wondering if I got bluffed out. I put Sam onto the letters to weaken his Lightbringers, and he puts Davos onto one of the quadrants. I maneuver my crossbows so that the Groundland scouts are penned in and I'm not getting flank charge, and more importantly, I'm going to be able to shoot him later. He goes ahead and moves his Kingsmen further away because they're pretty far out of the fight and there's not much good for them to do anywhere else. I send Cold Hands in on after the scouts. With Watcher on the wall, I got charge reroll, so I know I'm going to be getting him in the flank. And I'm thinking, I've got the crowns, so Final Strike doesn't have the negative modifier to it. I don't have any tokens on me or anything. I got a 3-up armor save. I'm only throwing 5 dice. What are the chances I kill myself on this one? I'm thinking it's pretty low. I managed to deal 5 wounds. He passes the panics test. I take a ping off Salice and Shreen, and I fail 3 of the armor saves. So boom, Cold Hands blows himself up with the final strike. I'm glad I was able to predict the final strike and not lose my veterans to it, but wow, it always feels bad just losing a unit to it. He then uses his Lightbringer's actual activation to shoot my veterans, and oof, I take tons of damage. I'm down to just 2 wounds, and I lose my cards. So now I've got to maneuver them so that they don't get shot again, and he tactical repositions at the start of my next turn, and I'm just maneuvering units around, including the veterans who no longer had a rear charge on the scouts, and I'm trying to just box them in and kill them before they do anything else. At this point, they've done way too much work. I attach, and now his watch is ended to Alliser's unit to try and give him a little bit of healing with a pseudo Dauntless. I couldn't have played it off the Cold Hands because it only procs off a melee attack, which just really shows how far the immediate demand effect of now his watch is ended has fallen. Round 3 starts, and I get to redeploy Cold Hands, so I guess if I'm losing anybody to a final strike, it's best that it's Cold Hands. Ryan is starting to use tactical reposition more aggressively now, and start of my turn uses it to try and shift away a little bit further from the veterans so that I don't get in, which making me think, okay, he probably doesn't have another final strike, but man, wouldn't it be awkward if I lost another unit to final strike? So I decide I'm just going to go ahead, take Aemon onto the swords, healing Corrin's unit, and shooting the scouts with the crossbows to soften them up, and it works out pretty well. I get about 4 wounds on them, and I'm able to start chipping them away. He's going to put Test of Faith onto his scouts, which we later realized we shouldn't have been able to do. It only works on a R'hllor unit, but whatever. He shunts off the weakened token, and he goes for yet another Hail Mary charge. This is now pretty big that he doesn't have the weakened token, because he's going to charge into my veterans in the flank. But I'm still using the Cold Hands order, so I'm like, alright, whatever, he's hitting on 6s. Like, what are the chances I'm actually going to take damage off of this? Maybe I'll get lucky and he'll flub the charge with the Davos reroll. He doesn't need the Davos reroll, he gets on in there. And he's going to play in R'hllor's name, the second one, to, again, give himself grip blow, because he's thinking, hey, if I'm hitting on 6s only, I might as well make each of those hits actually do something. And it works out pretty well for him, because he's going to go ahead and get himself a few of those. At this point, I'm starting to sweat a little bit because I'm trying my best to not lose a unit of veterans to final strike or some nonsense, and here we go. I place myself in a position where I'm losing my other units of veterans, and boom, there we have it. 2 crits. He's got 3 hits coming in at him, and he's got 3 wounds. I fail everything. I fail the panic test. I fail all the saves. I just get completely blown out of the water. He only takes the 2 wounds from go down fighting. He makes all of his armor saves. I'm going to play my And Now His Watch Is Ended, the second one, to put a vulnerable token out onto the Crownland Scouts and heal up my veterans a little bit, just in case he does have another final strike somewhere. But at this point, I'll give something else to kill these Crownland Scouts. I'm tired of them. These guys have done so much more than they have any right to do. But they've used their tactical reposition, and they're completely locked down. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to put Malister out onto the horses to maneuver my veterans on closer. I'm going to make sure I have the angle to charge them, but just in case something comes at me, I've got an angle looking at them too. It's a pretty long charge, so I'm worried that I'm going to need my second Watcher on the wall to get him. He's going to go ahead and put Salice and Shireen out onto the bags to heal up his boys. I'm going to put a token out by putting Sam onto the letters, trying to dig for Watcher on the wall, putting the panic token onto them since Alliser's got vicious. He moves up the Lightbringers to set himself up. That way, in case I fail my Hail Mary charge, I'm stuck out there, and he'll just be able to kill me either this round with Kingsman or next round with the Lightbringer attacks. Sam didn't get me Watcher on the wall, so Alliser's got to go for the 4-up charge, which I managed to luckily get, and I play Sword in the Darkness, so I can put a vulnerable token out onto the scouts. I'm going to pop him through, get him down to the panic test, and he fails that. I was a little scared I didn't manage to kill him on the hits alone, but we got there in the end, and I managed to heal 2 wounds off of that because he failed it, and I have Prey on Fear off of Alliser, and I'm going to go ahead and maneuver him further away from the nonsense because at this point, there's nothing going on there. I've got Kingsmen that have 2 to the last tokens on them. I've lost so much already. I've used one of my cold hands, my only cold hands death, and I've lost a unit of veterans. I'm afraid to get bogged down with him, and I think he's afraid to get bogged down with me. So he just maneuvers his Kingsmen around a 10-point block for the purposes of scoring to make sure he gets that quadrant. I move my crossbows to try and keep them a little bit safer with the veterans there. He puts Davos out into a quadrant, and I'm going to go ahead and move Cold Hands over there, staring towards the Lightbringers, because I'm going to want Cold Hands to try and harass them, because that's where basically all of his damage is coming out at this point. Start of round 4, Ryan's going to put Oath of Booty onto the Lightbringers, better late than never, and he's going to use Axel on the horses to try and get his Lightbringers into a better position. Now realizing that he can't put panic tokens onto my veterans, he's going to put the influence on my crossbows. I use Alliser's Threaten onto the Lightbringers, but he stags with it. I've got Alliser onto the bags now. I'm healing up in removing the token off my crossbows to try and get them to do something useful, and there's no point in taking Sword since he can just as easily shoot me off the bag, so I figure, hey, I might as well heal a little bit. I'm about to take some damage. The vets can take a hit, right? No. I take a ton of damage off the hits, and I crit fail the panic test. So my veterans are going to take a ton of wounds, and they're going to have that spread fear go on over to the crossbows, who are also going to crit fail and take max damage off of that. That hurt. So I put Aemon onto the letters, heal up a little bit, and get a weakened token onto the Lightbringers, and this one actually sticks. No more Stag's Wit. Ryan is going to place Elise and Shireen onto the crowns, and yet again, for the 3rd time in a row, I crit fail the panic test and take more wounds onto the crossbows. Iron Resolve is doing a lot of work right now by just straight reducing damage. I attach that Watcher in the wall I was looking for before onto Cold Hands, and I'm going to maneuver march him up, a whopping 18 inches to get into the flank of the Lightbringers. I don't know if I'll actually want to charge him because there is a second final strike somewhere in play, but I need him to think that I might do that. Plus, at the very least, I've got range of him now with the Cold Hands Raven Flock. He's going to go ahead and move those Lightbringers backwards, and when he does, I play Seeing Their Flaws to put tokens out onto him because I really need him to think that those Lightbringers are in danger. I then maneuver up my veterans, and he's going to maneuver around his Kingsmen to try and make sure that he's just not going to get shot up for free, and I'm going to have to use my activation on the crossbows to actually move them up. And sure enough, that's what I'm going to do. There's not much more to it. I just maneuver the crossbows, trying to make sure they're staying in their quadrant and getting them in range to threaten the Kingsmen. A very subtle but important play is that my last activation is Sam in the Lightbringers quadrant, which combined with Cold Hands is going to score me that zone. Here we stand as a funky kind of game mode in the sense that in most game modes, round 1 and 2 are all positioning, and then you duke it out round 3 and 4, and it's reversed in Here We Stand. Because now, start of round 5, I'm going to activate Alliser and once again put him onto the horses, maneuvering Cold Hands back into the Lightbringers' flank. He's going to put Axel onto bags and have the Lightbringers take a shot before they get locked down. However, between Cold Hands and the weakened token, he doesn't get any wounds off onto my veterans, so I'm able to just take Aemon, put him on swords, and have my crossbows shoot the Kingsmen. However, I only deal 1 wound, which he's going to heal back after the Dauntless. He's then going to activate his Lightbringers and do ton of damage, close to max possible damage off onto my veterans. It's absurd, but at this point there's no more ways for him to get attacks off after he gets that last shot, so I'm just going to go ahead, sentinel my crossbows out to get on into his zone to try and start threatening and pressure him. Again, I'm not really trying to kill him. I'm going to shoot him because, I mean, why not? But the goal isn't to kill him. The goal isn't even really to damage him. The goal is to get my crossbows into the Kingsmen quadrant, because I know that I'm going to be able to get my veterans into the quadrant that the crossbows are currently in. So that bottom left quadrant where my body physically is, I know my veterans are going to be able to move into and score. They'll have more than half of the tray there. I just need to get him to overinvest his NCUs elsewhere, especially Elise and Shireen. As a 5-point NCU, it can score a quadrant all on its own. So I bait Elise and Shireen into the Lightbringers quadrant, and then I just take cold hands and move him off into his own quadrant where he'll be able to score uncontested. He goes ahead and puts Davos in the other quadrant, hoping that maybe he'll be able to bait me, but I recognize it's only 4 points. It's not enough. I move the veterans. I think I fudged the shift a little bit there, but I know I had measured and I had plenty enough space that I'm sufficiently in that quadrant, and we're both scoring 2 at the end of this round. It was a lot tighter of a game than I thought it should have been. He got a lot, and I mean a lot, of lucky rolls, which I think is absolutely astonishing, because when it comes down to Ryan, I don't think I had ever seen him successfully land a charge before today. So it's like a year's worth of playing, all the bad luck he's had, finally shrugged off, and he managed to come through with it. But the Stag Knight play was really questionable. Once again, Night's Watch veterans are the equivalent of Rose Knights. And they're a little bit faster, so it's a little bit harder to ignore them, but I can assure you it's just as worthwhile to not do so. If the Stag Knights didn't go in and blow themselves up on the veterans, I think he probably would have won the game, especially with the way that he was rolling. He played the Crownland Scouts remarkably well and did a lot with them. He used his resource allocation with the tactics decks extraordinarily well. He just threw away the Selyse and Shireen once per game and the Stag Knights so early on. Maybe he got pressured by the heavy crossbow hit that he got early on. Whatever it was, it probably cost him the game pretty early on. And he managed to claw back as best as he could and turn it down to a standard victory, which is something. Not getting a crushing is huge for tournament play. I was really happy I was finally able to get the Alliser list out, and even though, for the most part, Ryan played around it well, I think the Stag Knight play really shows just some of the power that you've got. Even if you've got a buffed up unit charging in on the veterans, there's just so much game around them between their own abilities and Alliser's deck and the Night's Watch deck that there's just so much support. It is a nightmare unit to engage with. So you're kind of just left forced to trying to shoot them down. And when you're forced to go into a shooting match, you're giving up a lot of board presence along the way. So I like the list. I really enjoy it. I've played it a ton of times, and I don't think I've lost with it yet. I'm sure that's coming up soon, but in the meantime, I highly recommend this list, and just about any other list that Jeor recommends. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to put out my next Night's Watch video in the near future, which is going to be a list of my own, Benjen Stark in the Bolton's Bastards Girls.